Mother of the Beast by Micah Atkinson. Fade in. Exterior, field, village outskirts, day. A cloaked and hooded figure dashes across the field. He nears the tree line of a thick forest. In furious pursuit is Manon, a tall, thin man with dark hair and a long, dirty face. Sweat and blood stain his period farmhand garb. The hooded figure disappears into the tree line. At the other end of the field, a young man stumbles behind. Silas. He has the same sharp features as Manon. His dark hair falls in strands over his dirty face. Manon looks back across the field at Silas. Silas, eyes wide. Don't! Manon breathes in, turns, and dashes after the hooded figure into the forest. Silas freezes, mouth agape. He takes off after them, even though he won't catch up. Black. Mother of the Beast. Interior rustic cottage sunrise. A beautiful mother and child sleep facing each other. Arwen is a young mother with long tangles of hair and dark circles under her eyes. Han is a small child bundled in layers of heavy garments. Arwen in voiceover, singing. Want to give you everything. Want to show you love. Want to take away your pain. No, not strong enough. A distinctive, shifting sound is heard, heavy rustling, like wind sucking up wet leaves. Arwen's eyes flutter open as she turns. In the child Han's place now lays an adult man, Conrad, not yet introduced. Later in the morning, Han plays with tied cloth dolls. Arwen wraps a doll that resembles Han, smaller than the other dolls and wrapped in dark garments. Han stuffs berries into his mouth. He holds up a doll that resembles Arwen with long hair and a shawl. Arwen, still in voiceover. Terrible as they are, and gruesome as they may be, you're going to hear these stories, and I'd rather it from me. Arwen holds a double-sided doll. The doll has two faces, and one side has paler white fabric as its skin. Arwen. Beasts. Han, repeating. Beasts. Teeth. Han watches the double-sided doll and repeats. Teeth. Man. Man. Yet still underneath. Arwen turns the doll over, pale side to flesh-colored side. She caresses a scar etched between her neck and her heart. The scar is 3 lines. Together they resemble a claw mark. Interior hidden cave night. A clawed hand takes a charcoal piece from a smoldering fire. The cloaked and hooded figure draws on the cave wall with the charcoal. He adds to a series of symbols and glyphics. The hand is pale and large, with long fingers and talons. A choir of ghostly whispers echo through the cave in an indiscernible dialect, as if blown in by the wind. Red dream sequence. Montage. The figure of Arwen stands alone, silhouetted in red abyss. A man's hand reaches out and rests on her shoulder. A single silhouette writhes and contorts, morphing into silhouettes of many others, both human and animal. The child Han spins in silhouette. The layers of his garments swirl around him. A sharp talon nears the eye of a stoic man. The talon, in silhouette, seems to pierce the eye of the man. Interior Arwen's cottage. Continued. Arwen hands the 2-sided doll to Han. Han gazes down at the dolls positioned together. The Han doll, Arwen doll, and the 2-sided beast doll. Arwen. Once loved by all, till his curse was revealed. Left no choice but to flee. Some wanted him killed. The cottage door opens and daylight streams in. Arwen and Han look up to see Conrad enter. He is tall, brawny, and handsome, bald-headed, with a signature green cloak and an eye patch. Han, still repeating after Arwen. Killed. Conrad approaches with long, heavy footsteps. He kneels by Han and takes up a doll that resembles himself, draped in a green cloak and with an eye patch. Conrad, those who kill out of fear are the more dangerous ones. They forget that nothing is, and that everything becomes. He holds the Conrad doll and the Han doll, then think themselves strong. Arwen takes up a large, heavy basket. Won't be long. She and Conrad share a confidential look. Arwen kneels before Han and takes his face in her hand. Honor your father while I'm away. Han, I will. I try every day. Arwen smiles as Conrad stares into the empty space between them. Han piles more dolls into Conrad's lap as Arwen turns to leave. Conrad watches her go before turning back. Han, my child, a full day of work lies ahead. Conrad eats a few berries as Han crawls back under the blankets. I'd much prefer, as would you, I'm sure, to just return to bed. Conrad, yes, but alas, we cannot. He yanks the blankets off and scoops up Han as the child laughs and wiggles. Exterior, the village. Day. Arwen strides through the village carrying her basket. The other villagers eye her with silent contempt. Arwen avoids their glares. As she passes, the village women whisper to each other. Her hair, her skin, so pale, so thin. Arwen looks straight ahead. She passes Silas. He eyes her with the same contempt. Young farmhands surround Silas. The juvenile group scarfs down breakfast. Farmhand 1, leering. Maybe tonight she'll have a child with me. Farmhand 2. But then, how could one know just whose child it'd be? Silas catches Arwen's sad eyes for a split second. He swats at the other young farmhands. Enough of that, for not everything that's been said is true. And even if it were, what chance have you? Silas sneers as the other boys jab at the sheepish farmhand. Arwen continues and is abruptly approached by Martha. She seems to be around Arwen's age. Her dark hair is pulled into a tight bun, and she speaks short and quick. Arwen? Good morning, Martha. Arwen nods politely but keeps walking. Martha trails along, gnawing on a strip of dried beef. Off to forage in the wood once more? Arwen. Han likes the wild berries and mushrooms from the forest floor. Martha. How is your son, then? Han is hardly ever seen, and with the other children he never plays. Martha raises an eyebrow. Arwen doesn't pay attention. Arwen, confidently. Working with Conrad is how he prefers to spend his days. Martha nods but eyes Arwen incredulously. That really is such a large basket, Arwen. How many wild mushrooms do you intend to pick? Arwen stops, jaw clenched. She finally turns to look at Martha, whose face drops immediately. Enough for you and the whole village. You know, some wild mushrooms make one quite sick. Martha is taken aback, mouth full and eyes wide. Don't speak of Conrad, and don't speak of our son. And don't go searching for beasts, Martha. You may just find one. Arwen turns on her heel and exits. Martha rushes off, presumably to gossip, as Arwen nears the edge of the village. Arwen glances over her shoulder and discreetly drops a ball of twine from her basket onto the ground. The ball rolls off the dirt path and behind a hut. Arwen diverts off the path to retrieve the dropped ball. Now hidden, Arwen checks over her shoulder one last time. She then darts into the forest, disappearing into the brush. Exterior, Conrad's farm, day. Conrad approaches. Han follows closely. Silas is already there. He goes about farm chores. Conrad, greeting. Silas? Silas looks up and wipes his face. Conrad? Conrad nudges the quiet, shy Han. Han, dutifully. Good morning, Silas. Silas nods curtly. He takes a drink of water from a ladle. Under all those garments, you'll suffer from heat. He gestures to Han's layers of clothing. Han, when I do, I just pour cold water on my feet. He grips the dirt with his bare toes. Silas, to Conrad, there's work to be done, and the child can only play games. Conrad takes a threatening step toward Silas. First, he is my son, and second, he has a name. The men glare at each other. Accepting defeat, Silas turns back to Han. Han, there's a fence to be mended and a garden to plow. Han, I can tie a good knot. My mother taught me how. Han rushes off to work. Silas turns back to Conrad. Do you not hear what the others say? The whole village talks, I hear, but I care not. Silas lowers his voice. Conrad, you need not fear, for you are valued and respected. But Arwen is now disgraced, and Han will never be accepted. Conrad gazes solemnly. He knows this is true. Cut 2. Conrad and Silas turn a slaughtered cow onto its back, preparing to skin it. Han watches from behind them. Conrad, Han, don't be afraid. It is a bloody sight. He begins cutting. Han stares at the cow for a beat, then cocks his head. Han, beneath the skin is so clean and white. Silas takes the knife and cuts away at the skin. He moves too quick. Blood sprays. It crosses the chests of the men, but smears Han in the face. Conrad, careful! Slow. Conrad glances back at Han, who wipes blood from his cheek. Gets messy sometimes. Conrad turns back to the cow. Han licks the blood from his fingers. Neither of the men notice. Han, I know. Exterior, forest day. Arwen steps lightly through the forest. She grips the basket and watches all around her, not afraid but searching. Arwen brushes her fingers across the claw scar on her chest. She closes her eyes and breathes in deeply. She hears the distinctive shifting sound behind her. Slowly, Arwen turns to face an undisclosed presence as the indiscernible whispers blow in again on the breeze. Exterior, village square. That night. Silas sits around a fire with the other farmhands. They cook, drink, and laugh rowdily. A few village girls accompany them. Martha is among them. She gestures dramatically, in the middle of a story. She threatened to poison me. The whole village, everyone. She'd rather kill us all than live with what she's done. The girls gasp and nod in agreement. Girl 1. Well, if I were in her place, I don't know how I'd live. Girl 2. With a constant reminder. That bizarre little kid. Farmhand 1. He is strange, yeah. All those clothes, I mean. Never takes them off. Farmhand 2. He's probably furry underneath, and howls like a dog. Silas does not participate in the gossip. He throws back the rest of his drink and tosses the cup down. Oh, let the boy be. He's of no danger to you. The banter ceases abruptly. Martha eyes Silas. Have you forgotten, Silas? That's what Arwen said, too. The group exchange nervous glances. One of the farmhands smirks. About her lover, the beast. He won't harm you, she said. And the very next morning, Martha to Silas, you counted the dead. Silas glares back at her, then looks around the circle. He takes a farmhand's cup and drinks the last of it. He then turns and exits into the darkness beyond the firelight. Martha stares after Silas. She decides to chase after him. Along the path, continuous, Martha catches up to Silas. The fire crackles in the background, and the farmhands' voices can be faintly heard. Martha, Silas! She takes hold of Silas' arm and pulls him to a stop. She holds his face in her hands. He sneers down at her. Silas, I'm sorry. That was wrong of me to say. Terribly. Martha searches Silas's face for an answer. I too miss him so. Silas's eyes drop. He sways slightly from intoxication. Silas, it's not easy, you know. Every day, working with them, Conrad and now Han. I tried to forget. I tried to move on. But Martha draws in close to Silas and wraps her arms around his neck. She presses her face to his chest. Oh, Silas, some things we never forget, but that isn't wrong. Silas, I don't know how to feel or how to be strong. They look into each other's eyes, and she kisses him. Interior Conrad's cottage that night. The door opens abruptly as Silas stumbles in. Conrad looks up from his meal at the table. Silas is wet with sweat and sways from too much drink. He sits across from Conrad, where a second meal is set waiting. Conrad watches as the younger man shovels down food. Conrad, gate still needs mending. Silas, any strays? Conrad, could be in the night. Silas brushes strands of greasy hair away from his face. I've sweat all day, Conrad. Whereas you, it seems, would rather be at play. Conrad considers. I must now, too, care for my son. Silas scoffs. Ah, he, yes, the shameful one. Conrad, I am not ashamed. Silas, Arwen is not your wife. So tell me, just who is to be blamed? Conrad's fists tighten. Interior Arwen's cottage, night, simultaneous. Arwen and Han prepare for bed. Han pulls up his blankets and sits on the bed with the tied cloth dolls spread around him. Arwen, are you sure you want nothing to eat? Han, I'm sure. Not hungry. Han takes up the Conrad doll with the green cloak and eye patch. Arwen watches him fiddle with the doll. Han, why doesn't Father sleep in our bed? Arwen sits next to him. Soon no longer will you. Why does he go when the sky turns red? He must care for others too, the animals and the farm. Han, I wish you'd eat something. No. Han lays down and rolls over, his back to Arwen. Arwen's eyes fall. Silence. Interior Conrad's cottage, continued. Conrad and Silas watch each other across the table. Silas, was it worth the scorn or the loss of your eye? He gestures to Conrad's eye patch. Conrad, you don't understand. There are reasons why. Silas, why? Why not go to her now, Conrad? Why hide an offense born in such plain sight? Conrad, to protect her. Silas, her honor? Conrad looks down into his empty bowl. Is it wrong to mourn or be weak in the night? Her husband was taken from her, but she loved him, Silas, and yet she still took another. Conrad suddenly slams a fist on the table and stands. He looks as though he might jump on Silas. Don't attack me because you feel ashamed. What's been done is done. Perhaps you both are to blame. Conrad stands motionless for a beat, then exits. Conrad's room, continuous. Conrad leans against the wall and breathes heavily. He places a hand over his eye patch. He looks more pained than angry. Interior Arwen's cottage, continued. Arwen sits in bed. Han leans against her. She runs fingers through his hair and hums her goodnight song. Arwen, singing. Want to give you everything. Want to show you love. Want to take away your pain. No, not strong enough. Arwen gently lays Han down, now asleep. She gazes at the pale double-sided doll laying on the bed. She sighs softly before laying down herself. After a long beat, still wide awake, Arwen brushes the scar on her chest and breathes in deeply. Interior hidden cave. The cloaked and hooded figure opens his eyes and breathes out slowly. He removes his hood. Reveal Righteous. Righteous resembles a human man for the most part. His long, dark hair falls down over his back. His eyes are luminous and completely white. His skin is smooth and albino. He has an unkempt beard and long, talon-like fingers and claws. He drops a charcoal piece. As it hits the floor, the sound echoes through the cave. The indiscernible whispers begin to swirl through the cave. Charcoal drawings on the cave walls are revealed. Arwen's cottage, continued. Sudden wind picks up. Arwen hears the whispers. They come in through the blustering shutters and from underneath the door. Careful not to wake Han, Arwen slides out of bed. As she does, the Conrad doll falls to the floor. Hayloft, continuous. Arwen carefully climbs the ladder up into the loft of the cottage. Wind rustles outside. Arwen goes to the large window at the far end of the loft and thrusts it open. Thick wind floods the loft. The whispers ride along. The sudden winds force Arwen back. She falls to her knees. The loft is illuminated by the blue glow of the moon. Hidden cave. Righteous stands at the peak of a large boulder, the expanse of the cave before him. The small bonfire flickers below as he sheds his heavy cloak. Contrasted against his pale skin, a dark birthmark in the same place and shape as Arwen's scar. Righteous reaches out his clawed hands. He paws gently through the air in wide strokes, reaching and feeling for something seemingly intangible. The wind and whispers continue. Hayloft. Arwen lays on her back on the wooden floor. The moon highlights her form through the open loft window. As the whispers and wind blow, Arwen runs her hands along her body, as if they were Righteous's hands caressing her. Red dream sequence. In the red abyss, two pairs of hands reach up, meet and caress each other in black silhouette. Arwen's hands are delicate. Righteous's hands are large and clawed. Then the claws morph smoothly into human hands. Suddenly, a third pair of hands reaches in and takes Arwen's. In voiceover, Han's scream echoes through the red abyss. Interior, Arwen's cottage. Hayloft. The next morning. Arwen's eyes flutter open. The bright morning sun beams in through the open loft window. She sits up and notices she is clutching the Conrad doll. Arwen gasps and thrusts the doll away before turning. Han? Arwen's cottage, continuous. Arwen descends the ladder back into the main room and finds it empty. The bed is also empty, sheets strewn about. Han? The door is cracked. A small shaft of light spills in onto a pile of bloody garments left on the floor. Arwen's eyes widen. No. Exterior, Arwen's cottage, continuous. Arwen peeks her head out the door. It is early and the fog is still thick. No one seems to be around. Arwen steps out. She spies another piece of bloody clothing on the ground. Arwen goes to retrieve it. A dark figure lurks in the fog behind her. It vanishes as Arwen turns around. Han? The sudden sound of a bleeding goat from nearby. Arwen follows the sound. She creeps around toward the back of the cottage, hugging the wall. The goat bleats again. Conrad abruptly appears from behind Arwen. Conrad. Arwen! She jumps as Conrad reaches her, panting, out of breath. Conrad! A goat was found slaughtered last night. Not much remains by morning light. I told them it must have been the wolves, but... Arwen opens her mouth but can't find words. Conrad notices the bloody garments bundled in her arms. Why do you have these? They are distracted again by the bleeding goat cry. Arwen and Conrad both continue around toward the back of the cottage. The sound of the bleeding goat morphs into the distinctive shifting sound as they approach. behind Arwen's cottage. Arwen and Conrad discover not a goat, but Han. He kneels by a wash basin, scrubbing blood off his mouth and hands. He looks up abruptly, suddenly tearful. Conrad. Son. Conrad is frozen, stunned. Arwen turns and vomits. Interior Arwen's cottage. Sitting on the bed, Arwen carefully and silently picks slivers of bone from Han's teeth and deposits them into a bowl of cloudy red water. Conrad stands to the side and watches Arwen transfixed. Conrad fantasy. Arwen is silhouetted by a large open window. Sheer white curtains billow, and her hair blows in the wind. She is highlighted, angelic, beautiful and benevolent. Back to scene, Arwen's cottage. Conrad pulls his gaze away from Arwen. He rubs his eyes. We'll say it was the wolves. 4 or 5 it could have been. Han and Arwen's eyes meet. Neither speak. Exterior forest, sunset. Arwen strides again through the forest, basket in arm. Righteous, cloaked and hooded, stands behind a large tree. His white eyes glisten beneath his dark hood. He brushes the birthmark on his bare chest, then turns to step out into the open. Arwen hears the shifting sound. She stops and turns to him. Righteous has taken a completely human form. His features are softer. His skin is flesh-colored and his eyes are icy blue. Slowly he approaches Arwen. She sets her basket down and steps into his arms. They embrace and hold each other. Arwen. It's happening. Our son, Han, is like you, Righteous, and so it has begun. They remain in each other's arms. Exterior Conrad's farm, sunset. Conrad and Han mend the fence. Han works diligently as Conrad watches him, kindly but with concern. Righteous is voiceover. And Conrad? Arwen, voiceover. He knows. Righteous. It's an admirable thing he's done for us. His kindness reaches further than the wind blows. Martha approaches Conrad and Han as they mend the fence. Evening. Han ignores her. Conrad nods. Evening, Martha. Martha shifts her prying glance toward Han. Where's your mother off to, child? Vanishing into the wood all day? It's as if she's wild. Han doesn't look up at her, but he tugs particularly hard on a knot. Conrad intervenes. The treatment she receives, I don't know why she returns at all. If you've no help to offer, Martha, don't come to call. Martha clenches her jaw, offended. Silas approaches, wiping his brow, unaware of the tension. Evening. Martha's face loosens, and she smiles for Silas. It's a beautiful sunset. Yes, it is. Silas gives Martha a quick kiss. Conrad eyes the two of them skeptically. Silas. Has Arwen returned yet? Conrad sighs at the red evening sky. No, but I'm sure she'll be along. He stands and offers a hand to Han. Let's get you home. The day has been long. Han accepts the hand and stands, dusting himself off. Exterior village square, sunset. Conrad carries Han on his shoulders through the village. Han smiles and enjoys the ride. He is oblivious to the passing looks they receive from the villagers. Conrad nods solemnly to every passing villager staring at him. He knows they disapprove, but shows no remorse. Arwen's voiceover. Yes, he is a good man, and I believe that he loves us, as if we were truly his own. Interior hidden cave, night. Arwen and Righteous sit by the mouth of the cave. The sun has almost fully set. Righteous maintains his human form. He gazes at Arwen as she stares into the setting sun. Arwen. Of course the village doesn't approve. They'd rather see me thrown out into darkness. Righteous takes her hand. His human hand shapeshifts into its true form, the long, pale talons accompanied by the distinctive shifting sound. Righteous. Well, at least then we would be together. Arwen turns to him. Righteous is now fully the beast, pale with white eyes. Arwen reaches out to touch the birthmark on his chest. As the sun sinks, shadows fall over the cave mouth. Arwen, I stayed in the village for Han. Now there's no telling when. She trails off. Righteous cocks his head. He reaches out to touch Arwen's scar. When he will kill? Arwen looks up into his white eyes. Against his own will. Righteous. Yes. The will is strong. Yet some things are stronger still. A wind whips up from below and into the cave, carrying with it the indiscernibly foreign whispers. Arwen listens to the wind. What do they say? Righteous turns and gazes into the cave. Inside the cave. Righteous shows Arwen his charcoal cave drawings. Among the glyphics are depictions of Arwen and Han. Beasts with claws fighting against humans with spears. A three-headed figure and beasts depicted with wings, antlers, tails, and other animal traits. Arwen turns her gaze on a charcoal human handprint next to a larger, crudal charcoal beast handprint. Righteous places his human hand on the print of the taloned beast hand. He looks up at all the drawings. They're calling to me. A message through the sky. There are others like us. Han and I. They turn to each other. Arwen. And you want to find them? It is the only way. Arwen releases a breath and nods in affirmation. When shall we go? Righteous. Soon. Any day. Arwen bites her lip. Her brow furrows. Only Conrad must know. Righteous nods. If you wish it so. Interior, Arwen's cottage later that night. Arwen quietly enters the dim, candlelit cottage. Conrad and Han lay asleep on the bed. Han is wrapped beneath covers while Conrad lays awkwardly on top, as if not having meant to fall asleep. Arwen smiles. She goes to kneel beside the bed and speaks softly to Conrad. It's time. Conrad's eyes flutter open. Arwen repeats herself. More sure. It's time. Conrad. Time? Must you go? Arwen gazes past Conrad at the sleeping Han. The choice is not mine. Conrad places a gentle hand on Arwen's face and turns her gaze back toward him. He whispers, Am I too a beast that you feel you must run? The child needs a father. Arwen holds his hand, her eyes wet. He has one. She delicately removes his hand from her face. In doing so, Arwen notices something, a bite mark on Conrad's arm. It's inhuman, but not fresh. It's begun to scab over. Arwen looks up at Conrad with terror. Your arm! Conrad tries to keep his voice low. It was an accident. He meant no harm. Arwen struggles to maintain her whisper. When did this happen? Weeks. It's been weeks. It was just rough play. No, Conrad, don't you see? We cannot stay. The risk is greater every day. Conrad sits up, protesting. Han is still a child. He can learn from his real father. He needn't be wild. Arwen. It doesn't matter what he will or won't do. The village won't allow it. They'll chase him out too. Conrad. This time, I won't let them. And I won't let you. Arwen clasps his hands in her own. I won't let you continue laying down your life for us. It isn't fair. You've done more than we could ever have hoped. But the burden is not yours to bear. Conrad stares back into Arwen's eyes. Before tears are shed, he pulls away and stands, still careful not to wake Han. Before Conrad exits, he turns back over his shoulder. You know that my heart is pure. Arwen bites her lip. She nods. And mine is sure. Conrad turns and exits quietly. Arwen watches after him, even after the door has closed. She remains knelt by the bed and lowers her face into her hands. Exterior, forest, night. A gray wolf roams. It looks up above the trees as the sound of another wolf's howl echoes through the forest. After a moment of reflection, the wolf carries on. Deeper in the forest. The wolf sniffs the ground. It looks up into a dark, ominous patch of underbrush. The wolf sniffs closer and moves toward the shadows. It pokes its face in and drags out the open carcass of a smaller animal. The wolf gnaws at the remains. Distracted, the wolf does not notice the pair of glowing, white eyes that open and peer out of the same darkness. In a flash, the white eyes explode out of the shadows, and a dark figure tackles the unsuspecting wolf. Above the trees in a bird's-eye view, the moon and stars glisten over the dark blue forest. A wolf howls in the distance. Exterior, village square, night. Silas sleeps around the fire with some other farmhands and village girls, Martha among them. As the fire casts shadows across his long face, Silas starts to turn and flinch in his sleep. He has a nightmare. Red dream sequence. The silhouette of Silas finds himself in the red abyss. A strong wind blows and he looks around. Silas turns over his shoulder to find a large tombstone. He approaches and falls to his knees before it. Girl 1 in voiceover. "He won't harm you," she said. Farmhand 2 in voiceover. And the very next morning, "You counted the dead." A hand reaches up from the black tombstone. It clutches Silas's shirt. The hand pulls Silas to his feet as the black tombstone morphs upward into the silhouette of Manon. Manon takes hold of Silas's shoulders and stares at him with big empty eyes. Manon: "Why didn't you come after me, brother? Why didn't you help me?" Silas sputtering: "I was afraid." "As was I. Yet I pursued the beast. And... Manon's eyes roll back into his head. He coughs up blood onto Silas's face before falling limp into his arms. Silas kneels with the lifeless body of Manon. But suddenly, the body vanishes. Silas finds his arms empty. Then he notices a trail of blood in front of him, drops and smears. The trail leads to a dark figure in the distance. Silas stands and steps forward toward the figure. As he nears, the figure slowly turns, revealing long talons. The whispers rhyme on the wind. The figure is righteous, the beast, and he holds a dripping severed arm in his mouth. Silas snarls. "You." Silas takes off toward the beast. Silas: "Beast!" Abruptly, the beast rushes Silas with inhuman speed. However, the moment they collide, the beast dissipates into dark smoke and wisps away. Silas stumbles, confused. He spins. Behind him remains only the trail of blood, now leading back to the large black tombstone of Manon. Interior, Arwen's cottage, night. Arwen lays asleep next to Han. The hidden figure of Han squirms and shifts beneath the covers. Arwen's eyes open groggily. She looks over to Han, who is still hidden beneath covers. But Arwen hears growls. Low, gruff, canine-like whining. "Han?" Arwen's hand trembles as she reaches for him. But suddenly, Han's covered figure starts to grow. It rises, much larger than the child should be. The accompanying growls get louder. Han, an inhuman voice and still hidden. "Mother." Arwen's eyes widen. Terror. Red dream sequence continued. The silhouette of Silas looks to his side. An axe levitates in mid-air. He takes hold of it. Silas, axe in hand, stands over the silhouettes of Arwen and Han. Arwen gently pushes Han forward, sacrificially. Han falls to his knees before Silas, who raises the axe. Arwen's cottage continued. As Han's transformation takes place beneath the covers, Arwen's expression of fear turns into resolve. She tackles the large hump, wrapping her arms and legs around him. Han writhes, growling and whining. Arwen hangs on. They wrestle for control and release, ultimately spilling down onto the floor. A clawed hand bursts from the seething mass of blankets. It scrapes at the wooden cottage floor. Now, Arwen, on her back, manages to pin the wrapped figure in a hold, her arms around his neck and her legs around his torso. Through the blanket, Han bites Arwen's forearm. Arwen lets out a stifled cry as blood seeps. Han kicks and twists, but he and Arwen just rock back and forth on the floor. Blood trickles down Arwen's arm. Through clenched teeth, she hums her soothing nighttime song to Han. She can barely get the words out. Want to give you everything. Want to show you love. Want to take away your pain. No, not strong enough. The obscured figure whines, appearing to lose energy. Arwen weeps silently through her attempt to sing, still keeping her hold on the crippling figure. Red Dream sequence continued. Blood drips from the silhouetted axe. Arwen falls to her knees as wind blows. The lifeless figure of Han lies in a pool of black blood. Silas looks down at them. Over his shoulder, Manon stands by his black tombstone. Manon, finish him, lest he feast. Eclipse the sun. Instantaneously, Manon is right behind Silas. Over his shoulder, Manon whispers into his ear, "Slay the beast." Exterior village square night. Silas starts awake, gasping for air, eyes wide. The child. He sits up and looks around. Everyone else by the fire is already awake, watching him wide-eyed and silent. Martha, in particular, eyes him. Exterior Conrad's farm, dawn. Silas stumbles home through thick fog. He sees Conrad emerge from the cottage. Conrad glances around cautiously. He dons the hood of his green cloak and ventures away into the fog. Silas cocks his head, then narrows his eyes. He follows. Exterior forest, dawn. Silas stalks Conrad as he hikes through the forest. The gray morning fog is still dense. Silas accidentally steps down on a branch. It snaps. Conrad stops abruptly and turns. Silas ducks behind a tree to evade Conrad's eye. Conrad searches through the fog. He then turns his back to Silas and begins to untie his eye patch. Silas, unnoticed, observes from behind the tree. He can only see Conrad's back. Conrad removes his eye patch, revealing a thick scar over the concealed eye. The scarred eye is pure white, like the eyes of the beast. Conrad POV, through the eye of the beast. Vision through Conrad's scarred eye is blurry, prismatic, and blue-toned. It is clearly mystical. Through this lens, Conrad sees himself standing alone in the forest. He sees himself from behind. Conrad's point of view, through the eye, is that of another person, someone who is currently spying on him. Back to scene. Conrad straightens up, tense. I see you. Silas stiffens from behind his tree. Sweat drips down his face. Once more he peers out from hiding to see someone new. Another figure emerges from a different hiding spot. It is Righteous, also cloaked and in his human form. Conrad ties his eye patch back around his head as Righteous approaches. He removes his hood, revealing his human face. Silas breathes a sigh of relief. He stares out at them both, bewildered and now tense at the sight of the beast. This beast, Righteous, looks solemnly at Conrad. Arwen has told you of our plans, I assume? Conrad. Yes. How soon? Tomorrow, by dawn's first light. Conrad looks at the ground. Righteous, I believe what you're doing is best. Be that as it may, I have but one request. Righteous. Anything, for you have served my family beyond any debt. Conrad shifts uncomfortably, then turns resolute. If you return to Arwen and Han, and carry them with you far and beyond, don't forsake them again. Do not run and do not hide. Be there to defend him and stay by her side. Righteous is taken aback by Conrad's sincerity. I will, Conrad. I promise you. After a long pause, Conrad nods, turns and departs. Righteous watches him go. Silas adjusts his position to stay out of sight. Conrad disappears back into the foggy forest. Righteous then departs. Silas glances after each of the men, then decides to follow Righteous. He creeps along carefully. Exterior hidden cave, day. The cloaked figure of Righteous descends into the shadows of the large cave mouth. Down the hill and a ways off, Silas looks out from hiding. He gazes up at the looming cave entrance above. Exterior, field, village outskirts, day. Arwen and Han sit with a picnic in the middle of the sprawling grain field. They sit on a blanket, with Arwen's basket between them, some food, and the tied cloth dolls strewn about. Han inspects the two-sided beast doll. Arwen rests, drowsily watching him. Her arm is bandaged where Han bit her during their struggle. Arwen softly hums her soothing song, but this time she hums herself to sleep, exhausted. Her eyes close. Han glances at his mother and her bandaged arm. Careful to avoid waking her, Han opens the basket and digs inside. He removes miscellaneous items before pausing. Han draws up a large dagger from the bottom of the basket. Arwen wakes. She sees Han examining the dagger. Put that down, Han. Han continues to examine the blade. Han, innocent and curious. Mother? Would you still love me if I scratched you? The question gives Arwen pause. Yes? Han. Would you still love me if I made you bleed? Arwen. Yes. Though my heart would break. Han returns the dagger to the basket. He looks down and twiddles his thumbs. Would you still love me if I ate you? Arwen watches him without blinking. Well, then I'd be gone, and I could not love you. Han considers this, then nods. Then you mustn't go. Arwen. No, I don't intend to. Across the field, Silas returns, emerging from the forest. He spies Arwen and Han across the field. He crouches, then moves on, unnoticed. Silas arrives at the grave of Manon, the same grave as in his dream. He brushes away some weeds. He looks out again over the field. He can see Han embrace Arwen's open arms. Silas's eyes water. He wipes them clear. Exterior, Conrad's farm, day. Conrad works alone, again mending the broken gate. Without his eye patch, he squints up into the afternoon sun. Conrad, POV, through the eye of the beast. Conrad sees the charcoal cave drawings on the hidden cave wall, drawings of Righteous together with Arwen and Han. Back to scene. Conrad finally closes his eyes after having stared into the sun. He turns away. Begin flashback. Exterior forest evening. Flashback. 2 pairs of feet creep along the forest floor. Through the trees reveal Conrad and Arwen. Conrad does not wear his eye patch and has both eyes still intact. Arwen does not yet bear the scar across her chest. Arwen holds tight an infant bundled in layers. Conrad. He said nothing more, only to come at dusk? Arwen. Yes, only to keep heading north, and he would come to us. A twig snaps behind them. Arwen and Conrad whip around. A large gray wolf stands a few yards away. They freeze. Conrad takes a slow step forward to put an arm in front of Arwen and the infant. Arwen, get behind me. Arwen, wait. She looks closer. The wolf blinks. Its eyes are pure white. Through a shroud of thicket, accompanied by the shifting noise, glimpses are caught of the shape-shifting wolf, and now Righteous stands before them. His white beast eyes fade away into their human icy blue. Arwen. Righteous. She rushes to him. Righteous wraps his arms around Arwen and kisses her before gazing down at the delicate bundle in her arms. Arwen gently unwraps the swaddle to reveal the infant Han. He is covered in claw-shaped birthmarks, similar to Righteous's, but these marks cover almost his entire infant body, his arms, legs, and midsection. Righteous takes in a quick breath. Arwen, is something wrong? Righteous is transfixed by the infant Han's marks. No. He traces the marks across the infant's chest and arms. Han. He will be strong. More powerful than I. He turns to Conrad. Thank you for coming. Conrad. Of course. What happened in the village, it wasn't right. Righteous. I know. But it was no use putting up a fight. They made up their minds. Arwen. But because of lies. You protected the village. They don't understand. How can they, Arwen? They've seen I am not man. But you are no beast. Not like what they say. Conrad. With the damage that's been done, how do we protect Han? They all look down at the infant in Arwen's arms. Righteous. I think I know a way. Arwen and Conrad nod to Righteous attentively. Interior hidden cave night. Flashback continued. Arwen and Conrad sit with Righteous by a small fire. Arwen nurses the infant while Conrad stares deep into the flame. Righteous watches Conrad, awaiting an answer. Conrad. You're right. It's what's best for him. To have a chance at a life of innocence. Righteous. Arwen. She sighs deeply. It's not an easy decision. But I trust you. Righteous nods slowly as his human eyes fade away into pure white. He contorts in the shadowy glow of the fire. His skin goes pale and his talons grow long, the shifting sound. Arwen is unfazed by the shape-shifting, but Conrad's eyes widen. Arwen nods to him reassuringly. Righteous. This is the first thing we must do. He holds up one claw. Arwen moves closer. With his claw, Righteous exposes Arwen's lower neck. He holds his other claw over his own birthmark. You shall bind to me by this mark, to feel, think, and speak, even when far apart. Righteous carves the first line in Arwen's chest. She clenches her jaw as he draws the second line, then the third. Now Arwen and Righteous bear the identical marks. Conrad watches silently, but visibly disturbed. Righteous turns to him and Conrad looks away. Conrad, on you I bestow the guardian eye, that you may see through the lens of those you protect. Conrad looks up at Righteous. He breathes, his apprehension fading away into conviction. Righteous kneels before Conrad. Silhouetted by fire, the men watch each other as Righteous carefully inches a talon toward Conrad's open eye. End flashback. Exterior village square night. Present. Silas rallies the other farmhands around a fire. They brandish crude weapons, hatchets, pitchforks, torches. I saw him, the beast. I know now where he lays, killing by night and hiding by day. Why must we live in fear and in dread? We will never have peace until he is dead. The farmhands glance at each other doubtfully. The village girls sit and watch closely, Martha especially. Farmhand 1. What have we to gain from a mission like this? If he stays hidden in a cave, why take the risk? Farmhand 2. The risk of angering him. What if he returns? Yes, what if? The farmhands turn to Martha. She stands to address them. Would not this whole village burn? It seems clear to me that he is the one with the real axe to grind. Forced to live in cold solitude, leave his wife and child behind? Well, bastard child. The farmhands snicker. Emboldened, Martha continues. Yes, we know the beast tried to kill our dear Conrad, but Conrad was an adulterer. And then the beast murdered Manon, and of all men there was none nobler. Martha's eyes meet Silas's. He nods to her somberly. We mustn't fool ourselves by thinking he's through. He'll come back for all of us, you and you. It's simply what beasts do. She looks at Silas expectantly. He agrees. Silas, yes, I saw his face, his eyes and his claws. The paleness of his skin, it gave me no pause. For I have received purpose, and now I have no other. It is all reparation for the blood of my... Silas chokes up. He thrusts his head down. A respectful hush falls over the rowdy posse. Martha gazes across the fire at Silas. A tear dribbles down her own cheek. Martha, cold. Slay the beast. One of the farmhands affirms. Slay the beast. A spellbound chant starts to rise. Silas raises his head, his sadness replaced with bitterness. Slay the beast. The chorus crescendos. Slay the beast. Slay the beast. Silas! Hush. All heads turn. Conrad stands behind them, firm and still. Silence. You didn't return home last night. Silas. It is because, dear Conrad, I have found my fight. Murmurs of affirmation ripple through the crowd. Conrad notices, then turns his gaze on Silas. Even when there is good work to be done, you feel you must search for a fight. I must do what is right. Conrad sighs. He is expected to ask, and what, then, is right? All eyes shift toward Silas. The fire blazes behind him. I must slay the beast that has slain my brother. The farm hands stir in agreement. The village girls blush. Conrad's eyes narrow. Conrad. The beast named Righteous was cast out of our village, despite having harmed no one, and yet your brother pursued him. He was zealous, Silas. He was brave. He was cruel. My brother lies in a grave because your brother was a fool. An audible gasp from around the fire. Silas's mouth hangs open. He then spits out, No, you're the fool, and the whole village knows. When Arwen steals off into the wood, it is clear where she goes, to lie with the beast, an animal, because you haven't the nerve to lie with her again after the shame and the scourge that you produced in your sin. The child, the vile, the timid, the meek, there is no secret to keep. You are intemperate, and you are weak. Every mouth hangs open. Martha sneers. Conrad stares, astounded and upset. He turns abruptly and disappears back into the night. Interior Arwen's cottage, night. Arwen's head turns at a sudden rap on the door. Conrad, off-screen. Arwen! She hurries to open the door and find Conrad, sweating and flustered. He pushes inside and bolts the door. Conrad, what happened? It's Silas. He's been overtaken by bloodlust and false virtue. Arwen takes hold of Conrad's shoulders. Are we in danger? No. I won't let him hurt you. It's righteous. He's discovered the cave. With torches and hatchets, they'll soon be on their way. He looks deep into Arwen's eyes. They mean to slay the beast. Arwen breathes out slowly. She is surprisingly calm. Conrad, it is not righteous for whom I've concern. For no matter how many go, none shall return. Conrad's eyes widen. I must follow them. I too will go. No, stay with Han. He mustn't awake to find everyone gone. Arwen, yes. Conrad turns and hurries away. Arwen stands by the cracked door and watches him disappear. Unnoticed, Han hangs on the ladder leading up into the hayloft. Quickly but quietly, he ascends up into the loft. Hayloft continuous. Han approaches the open window at the far end of the loft. The moon shines through and silhouettes the boy. From beneath his cloak, Han reveals the two-sided cloth doll of the beast. He turns the doll over in his hand and gently touches the face of the doll's pale side. Han closes his eyes as wind swirls. The whispers follow. Han suddenly opens his eyes. They are now completely white and glowing. Interior hidden cave simultaneous. Righteous's white eyes also open. Wind and whispers spiral and echo through the cave. Righteous jumps to his feet. His talons scrape the dirt floor of the cave. Exterior hidden cave continuous. Righteous arrives at the mouth of the cave. He looks down into the woods below. Torchlights glimmer through the trees as the mob approach. He studies the posse, then turns abruptly and vanishes back into the shadow of the cave. Exterior forest night. Silas leads his mob to the edge of the wood. From the place he had previously hidden, Silas points up at the cave mouth. The armed farmhands gawk and tremble. Interior hidden cave night. Silas and the mob reach the mouth of the cave. Illuminated by torchlight, they gaze down into the shadows beyond. Farmhand 1. Silas, you're sure? I am. Where is he then? Either hiding or stalking. How then do we enter? Without answering, Silas takes the first step into the cave. Deeper in the cave, continuous. The farmhands follow Silas timidly. They approach Righteous's living area, the fire pit, a few articles of clothing and blankets, miscellaneous tools. Farmhand 1. What is that smell? Farmhand 2. Like decay, the rotting dead. Farmhand 3. I see no bones. Silas. It must be his own stench. The posse notice the charcoal cave wall drawings. They run their torches across the walls to observe. Did the beast make these? He must have. Does it then possess intellect? Silas waves them off. Silas. A bird has brains enough to form a nest, a rat to dig a hole. The thirst for blood and preservation of life proves not the presence of a soul. Righteous carefully appears out from behind a boulder. The glisten of his white eyes catches the glance of one of the farmhands. Righteous leans back as the farmhand shines a torch in his direction. The farmhand timidly approaches the boulder. And then, in a split second, Righteous appears. As the beast, his sharp teeth glisten by the glow of the torch. The farmhand screams as his torch is snuffed out. The shriek echoes through the cave, spinning the others around as they wave their torches and swing their weapons. Silas hops up onto the overlook boulder for a better view. Beast, show thyself. No longer shall you cower in darkness. A tense moment of silence. Righteous. In darkness I may be. Another torch is extinguished as its owner cries out and disappears into shadow. Silas whips around toward the scream and comes face to face with the shadowy figure of the beast. But cower I shall not. Righteous takes hold of Silas by the neck. His claw wraps around and his thumb traces the throat threateningly. Startled and paralyzed, Silas drops his torch. The other farmhands gather around, but not too close, still armed with their fire and hatchets. Righteous gnashes his jaws at the tightening circle of farmhands. They loosen their formation. He turns back to Silas. "Why have you come? I have remained here, unheard, unseen." Silas stutters before gathering his nerve. "My brother came to me in a dream, to say what he could not before he died. And with his blood still in your teeth, you dare ask me why?" Righteous cocks his head and opens his mouth to speak, but the farmhands suddenly find their courage. "Slay him! Slay the beast!" The mob starts to swarm. Righteous turns again and snarls, this time emanating an inhuman roar that echoes through the cave. Wind whips up and the mystic whispers reverberate off the walls. The farmhands back away, further this time. Righteous snaps back to Silas. "You are foolish." "Silas, you are obscene, unnatural, stinking, and vile. We will cut off your head, and also the child." The grip is tightened around Silas's throat. He is raised up off the ground. Righteous dangles Silas off the edge of the boulder, Silas kicking and gasping. Righteous, "My blood you shall not spill, and return to the village I will, and if I arrive to find so much as a mark on my son, I will rip out your heart." Silas stares. He croaks out, "Your son?" Righteous realizes he's made a mistake. "Stop!" The word echoes. All heads turn. Conrad stands in the mouth of the cave. He raises his hands, appealing to Righteous. "Righteous, please, do not become what they proclaim you to be." Righteous looks down at Conrad. Their eyes meet. Righteous's eyes shift from white to their human icy blue. "Conrad, he knows. They'll return to the village if we allow them to scatter." Conrad, "Yes, but soon what will it matter?" Righteous looks up at Silas with his human form eyes. He thrusts Silas down from the boulder. Silas hits the ground with a crunch and a grunt. The air is knocked out of him. He lays still and limp. Righteous faces the rest of the mob. Looking over them, he shifts into his fully human form. The mob gasp in fearful awe. "If any of you speak a word about my son or I, you will wake in the morning to find you have no sight." Righteous menacingly runs a talon across his face. The farmhands shudder and glance at each other nervously. Conrad scoops Silas's limp body up into his arms. He looks up at Righteous and watches him for a beat. Conrad nods, turns and exits the cave, carrying Silas. One by one, the farmhands follow Conrad. Their retreating figures are silhouetted by the moon at the cave mouth. Righteous, perched atop the boulder, watches them go. Red dream sequence, montage. A silhouetted mob marches through the red abyss. They brandish crude weapons and thrust fists into the air. Arwen and Righteous run through the abyss. They look over their shoulders, fearful. They skid to a halt as they come face to face with the mob. The mob surrounds them, forming a ritualistic circle. The members of the mob circle raise their hands in gesture, reveal the dark figure of Manon levitating above them. His head is raised and arms outstretched, the pose of a savior. Righteous whips around as the mob begins tightening their formation. Arwen is gone, and the circle closes in. Righteous looks up. Suspended in midair above, Manon holds Arwen's lifeless body in his arms. Righteous reaches up for them, but the mob sets upon him. His hand sinks into the dark, angry mass of bodies as he is drowned by the mob. Interior, Conrad's cottage, night. Conrad kicks open the door, Silas still in his arms. He enters to find Arwen waiting. "Conrad." "Arwen, it's all right." Conrad lays Silas down on a bed. "Is he alive?" "He only fell." "And the others?" "They are safe as well. When I arrived, Righteous agreed that more bloodshed would not be right." Arwen becomes incredulous. "It is not Righteous who wish to spill blood. These people, Conrad, they form a contemptuous coalition, possessed by fear, violence, and superstition. Conrad takes her by her shoulders. I know. And so we knew this day would come. The others are afraid, but once Silas awakes, you'll have no choice but to run. Arwen composes herself and nods. Exterior Arwen's cottage, night. Arwen exits her cottage, basket over one arm, a lantern in the other. She gazes back over her shoulder. Inside, Hans sleeps by candlelight. Arwen shuts the door quietly and leaves. Beat. A dark figure peers out from hiding, then follows Arwen. Exterior hidden cave, dawn. The same dark figure obscures himself behind a tree, watching Arwen approach the cave mouth. Righteous emerges from the shadowed mouth of the cave. He and Arwen embrace and kiss. The hidden figure gasps. It is revealed to be Martha. She clasps a hand over her mouth. The beast is here. Martha watches Arwen and Righteous descend into the cave. Interior, Conrad's cottage, dawn. Silas lays in bed. The early morning sun forces a sliver of light through the closed window and across Silas's face. Martha appears at his bedside. Silas! Silas starts awake. Martha? What's happened? Where is he? Shh! Where is who, Silas? He looks up at her with glazed-over eyes. The beast. In a cave. I saw him. With Arwen. Of course. Silas attempts to sit up, but is struck by pain and falls back. Martha lays a hand on his chest. What's wrong? The beast. He is strong. I couldn't stop him. He killed our men. Martha gasps. Silas, once my strength returns, I will have revenge. On him and his spawn. Martha blinks. His spawn? Silas. Yes. Just as I had dreamt. It is the child. Han. Martha stands abruptly, fists clenched. Cut 2. Conrad suddenly enters the room. However, he finds the room empty, and Silas asleep once again. He looks around the room, sure he had heard voices. Exterior, village square, day. Martha slithers through the village, her chest heaves. She nods to another village woman and forces a quick smile. Martha notices a knife sticking out of a workstation. She snags it as she passes and tucks it under her waist. Exterior, Conrad's farm, day. Conrad exits his cottage and looks over the misty farmland. He ties his eye patch around his head, then turns to leave. Interior, Arwen's cottage, day. Martha cracks open the cottage door and slips inside. The shutters are still drawn and the room is dark. Han sleeps soundly under his many blankets. Martha's eyes narrow as she spots him. She peers around the empty cabin and draws the stolen blade. The floor creaks as Martha takes a wrong step. She freezes. Han turns in his sleep and pulls a blanket over his head. Martha watches cautiously, then approaches the bed. She slowly raises the knife, reaching for Han's blanket with the other hand. Slay the beast. Martha grabs the blanket and yanks it back. Simultaneously, the shifting sound is heard. Arwen starts awake and looks up at Martha, eyes wide and frozen in terror. Martha's strike stops mid-swing. She too freezes, taken aback by Arwen's sudden appearance. Han is gone. Arwen lays where he had just been. Arwen speaks. What do you want? Martha, stammering. Arwen, I'm so sorry to have disturbed you. A beat. Arwen says, Han is not here. He is in the forest looking for berries. Martha still struggles for words. I see. I am not looking for him. Please, again, accept my apologies. Arwen, it's all right. Martha backs away slowly. Arwen watches her, unblinking. Martha backs into the door, then turns and hurries outside. Exterior, Arwen's cottage continuous. Martha stops and rests her hands on her knees. She gasps for breath, sweat on her brow. What have I done? Wasn't he? And how could she? Martha straightens up. Her bewildered expression shifts into suspicion. She turns and creeps around to the side of the cottage. Kneeling, Martha spies through the shutters. Martha POV into Arwen's cottage. Han sits in bed, alone. Back to scene. Martha draws back, stunned. She scrambles to her feet and back around to the front of the cottage. Interior Arwen's cottage continuous. Martha returns, swinging open the door. Instantaneously, the same shifting sound greets her. Only Arwen is there, watching Martha from the bed. Where is he? Han is not here. Martha brandishes her stolen knife. I am no fool, woman. I saw him. I won't ask again. She strides towards Arwen, who leaps out of bed and darts for the hayloft ladder. Arwen says, in the voice of Han, No, leave me alone. Martha's mouth falls open. She shakes her head to recover from shock, then pursues, quote-unquote, Arwen up the ladder. Martha grabs Arwen and pulls her down. What trick is this? Who are you? Martha holds the knife to Arwen's throat. Pinned to the corner, she pants and glares at Martha, petrified. Are you the beast? While you still can, I order you to speak. Arwen struggles for breath. She shuts her eyes tight. An unsettlingly instant calm comes over Arwen. A sudden gust of wind blows open the shutters. The whispers swirl into the cottage. The noise startles Martha. She turns to the flustering window, then back to Arwen, whose eyes are now glowing pure white. Arwen says, in the voice of Han, Let me go. Arwen kicks Martha. Martha tumbles backward to the floor. Arwen disappears up the ladder and into the hayloft above. Martha scrambles to her feet and pursues. Hayloft continuous. Martha appears and is met by a burst of wind and light. Across the loft, the large window has been flung open, and a tall, cloaked figure stands with their back to Martha. Quote-unquote, Conrad turns and faces Martha. They are alone in the hayloft. Martha's mouth drops open. She lets out an exhausted whimper. The mystical whispers fill the loft as Conrad approaches Martha, whose knees buckle. She thrusts the knife out in front of herself in feeble defense. Who are you? What are you? Conrad clasps a big, strong hand around Martha's knife-wielding wrist. The knife drops to the floor as Conrad yanks the woman closer to him, his eyes beaming white. Exterior Arwen's cottage continuous. Martha's shrill scream sounds from the hayloft. The real Conrad, already approaching the cottage, breaks into a dash at the sound of the scream. He barrels inside the cottage. Hayloft continuous. The real Conrad appears at the top of the ladder. He freezes at the sight before him. Conrad sees himself with Martha in his arms, sharp teeth sunk into her forearm. Stop! The other Conrad looks up abruptly, mouth coated in the blood of the near-faint Martha. Conrad, in the voice of Han, No! Leave! Hearing Han's voice out of the beast before him, Conrad regains his confidence. He takes a stern step forward. Han, let her be. Han angrily thrusts Martha aside. She collapses. Regain your natural form, now. I don't know how. Conrad takes another step toward the shape-shifting Han, who spins on his heels and bolts for the open loft window. No! Conrad goes after him. Han leaps out the window. Conrad jumps out into the daylight after him. Exterior Arwen's cottage continuous. Both Conrads fall from the hayloft window. The real Conrad grabs hold of the impersonator as they crash into the ground below. Quote-unquote Conrad does not seem fazed by the fall. The real Conrad rides on his back, wrestling him to the ground. They claw and flail before Conrad gets a chokehold around Han's neck. He claws at the dirt and gasps for air. Turn back! I know you can! As Conrad nears the point of passing out, the shifting sound is heard again. Beneath Conrad, the mass of the fake Conrad shrinks as Han regains his child form. Conrad turns over the limp body of Han. He is unconscious. Conrad takes the child up in his arms. He catches his breath and searches the area for any sign of an onlooker. He sees no one, except Martha. She leans in the doorway of Arwen's cottage, clasping a blanket over her bitten, bloody arm. Conrad goes to her. Lean on me. Martha falls onto Conrad's shoulder and whimpers in pain. Conrad speaks low and rigid. A wolf in the forest. You were taken by surprise. If you dare speak the truth, there'll be no rescue next time. Martha nods, and they begin limping toward the village square. Exterior village square day. Many heads turn as Conrad appears, with Han in his arms and Martha hanging on his side. Han, concealed in his garments, appears asleep. Women rush to the aid of Martha, who bursts into tears. A wolf came upon me. I was so frightened. The eyes of the men follow Conrad, as do the scowls of the mob of farmhands. Conrad returns their glares. His look is a warning. Interior, Conrad's cottage. Conrad enters, holding Han close. He looks around the room. Silas? No answer. Conrad takes slow, quiet steps toward the bedroom. Bedroom. The bed is empty. Conrad breathes a sigh of relief. He sets Han down on his own bed. Conrad watches the small, still body, as if expecting it to shapeshift again. He turns away and unties his eye patch. Conrad POV, through the eye of the beast. Conrad sees into the hidden cave, through the eyes of Righteous. Righteous shows Arwen the cave drawings. Inaudibly, he explains the drawings and symbols and traces a trail through the forest on a crude map. Back to scene. Conrad stares forward unblinking, transfixed by his vision. He does not notice behind him, as the shrouded figure of Han rises from the bed. Conrad. Now. We must go now. Conrad blinks and closes his eyes, ending his vision. Then he hears it, the low breathing from behind him. Conrad turns carefully over his shoulder. Han stares down at him, standing on the bed, for the first time in his whole beast form. Conrad freezes. In a flurry of garments and blankets, Han descends onto Conrad. Exterior village square day. Silas, with some difficulty, stands up on a perch to address the crowd of villagers gathering around him. He has one arm wrapped in bandages, along with his ribs. Silas scans the townfolk through greasy strands of hair. My friends, we must seize the day, for the time has come. Now we are many, and he is but one. Martha stands by Silas, her arm also bandaged. The young farmhands step forward. We shall return to the cave, undetected while he sleeps. They raise their torches, and will set his stinking flesh ablaze. Silas. He is not whom of which I speak. The crowd murmurs amongst themselves, confused. Friends, hear now the secret I can no longer keep. There is another beast. Here in this village, he too soundly sleeps. The villagers gasp, awaiting an explanation. Silas steps down from his podium and paces theatrically. In our hearts we all feel there's been something amiss. Debauchery, betrayal. They give birth to this. Silas holds up Martha's arm and tears away the bandage to reveal the beastly teeth marks. Martha exaggerates her distress as the crowd draws back in horror. These teeth, this bite, is but a taste of what might come if we do not take action and finish what my brave brother could not. We cannot let this second beast escape too. Villager 1. Where is it? Villager 2. Is it here? Martha. Silas. Tell them who. She wraps her arm again as Silas turns to the crowd. Justice. It must be. One beast for another. Its voice is quiet, though its roar is deafening. And Arwen is its mother. Chatter erupts. I knew it! Of course! Didn't I say? Interior Conrad's cottage continued. Han has just sprung on Conrad. They crash to the floor. On his back, Conrad pushes Han back by the wrists. Han attempts to swipe with his talons and gnashes his teeth. Villager 1 in voiceover. But Conrad, Silas, in voiceover, has played us all for fools. He is not the father, and he left us many clues. Conrad rolls himself over Han. He pins Han to the floor, setting his full weight on the beast child. Han curls his knees and kicks Conrad in the chest. Conrad stumbles backward and onto the bed. Villager 2, voiceover. The child of the beast. Martha, voiceover. His thirst for blood has been awakened. Silas, voiceover. Regardless of this danger, we must not be shaken. Conrad yanks the thickest blanket from the bed. As Han darts at him, Conrad pulls the blanket over Han's body and wraps his arms tightly around him, the same strategy Arwen used to subdue Han. The two of them stumble back and forth until Han slams Conrad's back against the wall. Han then flips forward, flipping Conrad in the process. Conrad lands on the floor with a grunt as Han struggles out of the blanket. Conrad notices the tied cloth dolls in a pile and reaches for the Han doll. As the beast turns to him, Conrad holds up the doll like a crucifix. Han stops. Conrad, you. This is you. For a moment, it seems like Han may calm. His clawed hand reaches out and takes the doll from Conrad. After gazing at the doll for a beat, Han bites the head off. Conrad twists around on hands and knees and attempts to scramble away whilst getting to his feet. Han lunges, grabs hold of Conrad's ankle and pulls. Conrad hits the floor, then Han tosses him against the wall. Conrad hits the wall with a crack and falls to the floor again with a final thud. Showing no remorse, Han twists around to make a hasty exit. Conrad struggles in an attempt to lift himself up. Exterior Conrad's farm, continuous. Han emerges from the cottage and immediately comes face to face with the entire village, now coalesced as a mob. Silas leads the mob, axe in hand. Han throws off his hood to reveal he has regained his human form, a small frightened child. Silas nor the mob appear deterred. Conrad stumbles to the cottage doorway, limping and beaten. He cannot fight anymore. He looks out over Han's shoulder as the malevolent mob begin to close in. Exterior hidden cave day. Righteous and Arwen prepare for their escape. Abruptly, Righteous turns toward the mouth of the cave. A wind rushes in and whispers echo. Righteous POV, through the beast eye. Righteous sees through the eye of Conrad. He watches the mob lead Han away from Conrad's cottage. Han is tied and bound, surrounded by angry villagers. Conrad falls to the ground and the vision goes dark. Back to scene. Righteous turns to Arwen. He opens his mouth but cannot speak. What is it? What did you see? We're too late. Exterior Conrad's farm, continuous. The battered Conrad is bound to a gate post. He is still without his eye patch. He tries to pull himself free, but he is weak and wounded. He looks up into the distance as the mob disappears, leading Han away with them. Conrad, breathless. I'm sorry. Exterior hidden cave, continuous. Righteous appears at the mouth of the cave. He looks out over the forest below, chest heaving. Arwen chases after him. Righteous, please. What are you going to... She is interrupted by the shifting sound and subsequent flutter. Black feathers fall. A large black bird flies down from the cave and over the forest toward the village. Arwen watches him go. Please, be the man I know you can be, and not just the monster they see. Righteous disappears into the sun. The light flares. Begin flashback. Exterior, Arwen's cottage, sunset, in flashback. Righteous chops wood. He wears villager garb and his hair hasn't yet grown long and untamed. He wipes sweat from his brow and turns to look over the field toward the village outskirts. Two figures are at work in the field. Exterior field, village outskirts, continuous. Conrad and Silas work in the field. They laugh and chat. Conrad does not yet have his eye patch. Conrad looks up as the sun dips below the tree line of the forest beyond the field. Exterior forest, sunset. Flashback continued. As dusk falls, glimpses of burnt orange sunlight creep through the trees into the shadowy forest. Two small children rush past, giggling. They cling to baskets, out of which drop a few berries. The children scoop up the berries and nibble on a few. Deeper in the forest. Arwen kneels, basket in arm. She delicately harvests mushrooms from a hidden spot on the forest floor. She stands and steps backward into a figure, a man. Manon. His long, sharp features seem exaggerated by the shadows of the forest. Arwen spins, startled. Manon catches her by the shoulders. "Oh, Manon." Manon, smiling. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause you fright." Arwen. "No, I just realized I should be getting back. We're losing daylight." She turns to leave, but Manon holds onto her arm. "Arwen, wait, please." Arwen looks back to him. She then notices a slight sway in his posture. His shoulders slump. "What is it?" Manon abruptly turns sheepish and looks down. I don't quite know how to say." Arwen breathes in. She detects a smell. "Manon, you smell as if you've been drinking all day. Come on, let's go find the others." She reaches for his hand to lead him, but instead, Manon twists and takes hold of her wrist. "No." Forest clearing. The two small children tumble out of the brush into a clearing. They skid to a stop as their faces drop. Before them, in the center of the clearing, a large wolf gnaws on the remains of a deer. The wolf looks up. The nervous children huddle closer to each other. Deeper in the forest, Manon has Arwen by the wrist. Her eyes narrow. "You're hurting my wrist." "Arwen, listen, let me go. I see the way you look at me, Arwen. As leader of the village, I could take any woman I choose. But none of them, even in their fair beauty, compare to you." Arwen begins to breathe heavy. "And what of Martha? Is she not soon to become your betrothed?" Manon, spiteful. "Martha. The girl is a fool, so silly and simple. Not at all like you." Arwen. "Manon, you know I am committed to Righteous. I love him, and want no one except for him." "Why? What in him do you see? That he is mysterious and foreign? Please, just let me be." Arwen wrenches away from Manon's grip. He glares. She turns and takes a few steps. "Arwen, wait!" He starts to pursue. Arwen breaks into a sprint and calls out, "Somebody! Can anyone hear?" Manon overtakes her and clasps a hand over her mouth. Arwen drops her basket and uses both hands to try and escape. Manon uses his other arm to grapple with her prying hands. Arwen bites the hand that covers her mouth. Blood trickles through Manon's fingers. He cries out briefly before clenching his teeth. Arwen writhes and twists, but Manon holds on. Their legs tangle and they fall to the forest floor. Arwen attempts to crawl out from under Manon, but he again overtakes her and uses his weight to keep her down. "No! Somebody stop! Stay quiet! Crack!" Manon is struck over the head with an object from above. A boot kicks him in the side. He rolls off of Arwen and onto his back. He grunts, then is silent. Arwen looks up to see Conrad, standing with a shovel. Before either get a word out, more screams sound, screams of the small children, not too far away. Forest clearing. One of the children desperately hurls rocks and sticks at the dark writhing mass, the wolf grappling with the other child. The wolf sinks its jaws into the boy's shoulder and he screams. In an instant, a third figure enters the fray. Conrad leaps out of the brush and tackles the wolf. The impact tears the wolf away from its squirming prey. The other child rushes to the boy's aid. Conrad. "Run!" The tearful children pull each other up and dash into the forest, leaving the guttural sounds of conflict behind. Exterior Arwen's cottage, dusk. Flashback continued. The sun has set behind the trees. Night begins to fall. Righteous is about to enter the cottage when... "Righteous!" Arwen from off-screen. He whips around. He sees Arwen dashing across the field, away from the forest and toward the village. She carries the wounded child in her arms. The other child trails behind. Instantaneously, Righteous is gone. Leaves swirl in the wind, kicked up by his rapid departure. A beat later, Righteous is seen running to meet Arwen down in the field. His speed is inhuman. Exterior, forest clearing, nightfall. Flashback continued. An entire pack of wolves have set upon Conrad. They form a violent, dark mass in the center of the clearing, dimly lit by the glow of the new moon. Conrad fights well, but is outnumbered. Suddenly, one of the wolves is ripped away from the chaos. Canine whimpers and the crunching of bones. A shadow flies past like a bullet, and another wolf is taken out. Deeper in the forest, Manon blinks. He opens his eyes and winces in pain. He finds himself on the ground. His head is bleeding and he struggles to pull himself up. Suddenly, Manon hears the sounds of the nearby wolf brawl. Forest clearing. Manon stumbles toward the clearing and drops to his knees. Eyes wide, he watches the event unfolding before him. A fight between Righteous and the wolf pack. In the clearing, Righteous hurls a wolf against a tree trunk. The wolf snaps and collapses. Another wolf leaps at Righteous. He catches it, piercing it through the neck with his talons. Conrad lays limp on the ground. His heavy eyes open, his face coated in blood. Conrad manages to turn his head and peer up at blurry silhouettes of Righteous and the wolves. One wolf remains of the pack, a larger, darker alpha. He and Righteous take careful steps toward each other. With the shifting sound, Righteous's body lowers toward the ground as he shapeshifts into an equally formidable wolf. His white eyes glow in the dark. Manon's mouth hangs open. His eyes dart back and forth. He snaps out of his daze, turns and stumbles away, back into the forest, clutching his bleeding head. Exterior, village square, night. Flashback continued. Manon arrives back at the village. He stumbles toward a crowd of villagers that have gathered around Arwen and the two wounded children. Silas, among the crowd, spots Manon first. "Manon!" He rushes to him. Manon's eyes narrow and his jaw clenches. He stumbles and falls into his little brother's arms dramatically. He has to put on a performance. Manon. "Oh, Silas!" "What's happened? Are you hurt? Everyone! Listen! Something horrible I have seen!" The villagers all turn and gasp as Manon's bloody face and head come into view. He and Silas arrive at the fire. Women rush to tend to Manon's wounded head. Martha pushes through the crowd and flings herself onto him. "Manon! Oh, my darling! What is it? What have you seen?" Arwen watches gravely. She and Manon lock eyes for a moment. Manon looks away to address the crowd. "A monster, with long, vicious talons and razor-sharp teeth. I heard a man cry out, and then I saw through the trees. Conrad under attack by this half-human beast." The villagers gasp, Arwen included. A look of complete bewilderment flushes her face. Then her eyes narrow. Silas. "Were you also attacked?" Manon. "Yes. I tried to defend Conrad, but felt a blow to my head, and everything went black." He delicately touches the wound on his head. "But the last thing I saw, before my eyes closed, was the face of that beast. It was a face that I know." Arwen opens her mouth to object, but suddenly the crowd is distracted by a new arrival. Out of the shadows steps Righteous, tattered and bloodied from head to toe. In his arms he holds the also tattered and bloodied body of Conrad. Villagers cry out and clasp hands over their mouths. Arwen. "Righteous!" "It is he!" Manon thrusts forth an accusatory finger. "The beast stands before us!" The crowd erupts and gasps, murmurs in fearful frenzy. Arwen. "No!" She steps forward, between Righteous and the crowd. "It's not true! I know what I saw! It can't be! You're wrong!" Martha and Silas step up to Manon's defense. "See, woman, he is covered in the blood of our Conrad, and he is a foreigner. We know not from what land or tribe he came." Arwen pleading, "But he is a good man." Manon. "Is he not more than man? Does he not hide a true form?" Arwen now thrusts an accusing finger into Manon's face. You "You are the one hiding at—" She is interrupted. Manon abruptly grabs hold of her. He yanks Arwen down to subdue her. She cries out, and this action has the desired effect. Righteous steps forward and gnashes beastly teeth. He roars in defense. The crowd is astonished and mortified. Silas, stunned. "It's true." Arwen's head drops. Manon is wide-eyed and thrilled. Arwen pulls away from him. Silently, she goes to meet Righteous. Righteous lays Conrad's body down on the ground. Conrad begins to groan and stir. Without another word from anyone, Righteous and Arwen turn and exit the square. The crowd remains in stunned silence. A small, gratified smile crosses Manon's lips. Exterior Arwen's cottage, morning. Flashback continued. Righteous exits the cottage. He wears a heavy hooded cloak. He is now the hooded figure from the opening scene. Righteous halts. A village mob has been waiting outside the cottage. Manon stands at the front of the mob, with Silas and the farmhands close behind. They carry weapons and torches, prepared to extricate the threat of the beast. Exterior field, village outskirts, minutes later. Righteous dashes across the field, fleeing the mob. The opening scene now plays out, again in real time. Manon pursues Righteous. Righteous disappears into the forest. Manon looks back at Silas. Silas watches as Manon decides to chase Righteous into the forest. End flashback. Exterior field, village outskirts, present day. The new mob sets out across the same field, dragging their small captive Han. They march past the memorial tombstone of Manon. Silas glances at it as he passes. Han remains bound and surrounded on all sides by farmhands. Silas, leader of the mob, raises a hand. Everyone halts. Silas's arm is still bandaged. The other holds the axe. He stretches a hand out over the field and gestures toward the forest tree line beyond. "When last I saw my fearless brother, he ran quick in pursuit of the primordial beast. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't know it'd be the last time that I would see him, disappearing into the trees." Silas turns, tears on his cheeks, and glares down at Han. Han looks back up at him, confused and afraid. The villagers are also emotional. "Your brother was a good man, Silas. Brave." Silas bends down to Han, jaw clenched. "Yes, and yet you're the one they chose to save." With the hilt of the axe, Silas strikes Han across the head. Han cries out and falls as the mob reacts gleefully. "Show us your true form!" Han retains his child face and form. Silas smacks him again and the villagers applaud. "Show us your teeth! Why hold back any more?" Han, now bleeding, still does not shapeshift. Silas scoffs. "To hell with you. What does it matter? You've had your chance to put up a fight. I always thought you were weak. Even now as the beast, it seems I was right." Silas holsters his axe. Han is silent, but his eyes narrow. Silas, "Give him to me." The farmhands hand over Han's reins. Silas turns to lead the sacrificial Han further into the field. The rest of the mob watch in anticipation. Further in the field, Silas gives one final tug of the reins. Han falls to his knees in the dirt. Han is still hooded and wrapped in his many layers. Silas drops the reins and draws his axe. "I dreamt of this moment, but now I am awake." He approaches, but as he does, the shifting sound emits from beneath Han's layers of garb. The voice of Martha. "Silas, you've made a mistake." Han looks up. Beneath his hood, he has taken the form of Martha. Martha pleads with Silas, afraid. Silas's face drops, taken totally aback. He shuts his eyes and shakes his head, then looks again. Still, he sees Martha before him. Martha? What is this? Silas looks across the field at the mob. Martha is there, clearly, stationed in the front. Martha lunges at Silas while he is distracted. She suddenly bares sharp teeth. The teeth sink into Silas's bandaged arm. He cries out and drops the axe behind him. He rips Martha away from his arm and kicks her back to the ground. "Beast!" Silas turns away momentarily to retrieve his axe. Shifting sound. He turns back to face himself. Tied and scrambling on the ground, Silas sees himself staring back at him. Tree line. Righteous emerges from the forest. He is cloaked and hooded. Across the field, he sees the scene taking place between Silas and the Silas double. Righteous starts out toward them. The field. Silas stares down at himself. He shakes off the shock. No, it's not real. He raises the axe once more. Han turns and frantically tries to wiggle away. The shifting sound is heard again, followed immediately by the bleating of a goat. The ropes of captivity and layers of Han's garment slip off to reveal the stumbling figure of a small goat. Silas, with a sturdy swipe of his leg, kicks the goat's legs. It topples onto its side. Shifting. Han turns over on his back, now freed from the ropes. Also, without his garments for cover, the claw-shaped birthmarks on his chest, torso, and arms are in full view. Han. No! Silas takes in a breath, studying the marks. Cursed as you are, one beast for another. Your blood spilled for the blood of a brother. Silas halts at the familiar voice of Manon. He turns. Manon stands behind him. He's just arrived from the direction of the forest tree line. He says, "Silas?" Silas is stunned. The axe falls to his side. Han sits up to see the newcomer, bewildered. The mob of villagers strain to see the newcomer. Is that? No, it can't be. Manon. Silas can't take his eyes off of, quote-unquote, Manon. Silas, stammering, You've returned. Manon, no. Manon takes slow steps towards Silas. My death was by my own foolishness, on cursed, distant ground. In pride I pursued the beast, and I was struck down. Tree line. Arwen now emerges from the forest. She sees across the field as Manon draws nearer to Silas. Han is on the ground and the mob lingers behind them all. The field. Quote-unquote Manon watches Silas, who is perplexed and winded. Silas, but you came to me. In my dream, you said I must slay the beast. After a pause, Manon stretches his arms out to Silas. And you have. Is it not clear? The beasts who dwell in all of us. Anger, myth, and fear. Silas glances at the dusty ground, then back to Manon. Then what of the child? Manon, you've slain your beast, brother. Allow me to slay mine. Deliver him to me, as atonement, sacrifice. Han's eyes widen, unsure of his fate. The mob starts to grow restless, also unsure of what to make of the scene unfolding before them. What's happening? Silas, what are you waiting for? At the tree line, Arwen hesitates to step forward out of the brush. She hangs back to observe a little longer. In the field, Silas looks back at the mob behind him. He nods slowly as he mulls over Manon's proposition. Yes, as it should be. One beast for another. Silas reaches for Han. Han squirms to escape. No! Manon, silence! Child of the beast. Manon points at Han. They lock eyes. For a moment, Manon's eyes flash their true, pure white. Whispers blow past on the slight breeze. Han's body relaxes. He recognizes the eyes. Silas pulls the boy up. Han complies. You've done well, my brother. Manon begins to lead Han away, but as he passes Silas, Silas catches a scent whipped up by the breeze. His eyes narrow. Wait. Manon and Han turn back. Your face is my brother, but your stench. Manon's eyes widen. Silas turns on his heel to retrieve his axe. Manon, now in the voice of Righteous, Han, run! Manon and Han take off toward the forest. Silas, beast! No! He bolts after them. The mob perks up. Martha steps forward. It's not our Manon. He is not Silas' kin. He consumes his victims, then dons their skin. The mob thrust their weapons into the air and charge. Righteous and Han run across the field, pursued by Silas, pursued by Martha and the mob. As they near the tree line, Arwen finally steps out. Righteous and Han arrive at the tree line. Arwen, Han! He leaps into his mother's arms. They turn back to see Silas and the mob closing in fast. Silas, you won't escape again! Righteous puts out an arm, gesturing Arwen and Han to get behind him. He steps forward, plants a foot, and roars, louder and longer than before. He bares his teeth, in full beast form. Han steps forward and does the same, producing a howl almost rivaling that of his father's. Silas and the mob slow and stumble to a halt at the sight and sound of the two beasts. The two parties stare each other down. The village mob is fuming, but timid. Martha, Silas, do something. Farmhand 1, Silas, do we fight? Silas's chest heaves. Arwen steps forward. Not if you value your life. Silas and the mob stand frozen. As Arwen, Righteous, and Han start to back away into the forest shadows, Silas has his final word. You will never be safe, so you will never be free. It matters not where you run, how far or how long. Righteous, you are wrong. Our freedom is not in our safety. Arwen puts a hand on his shoulder. And we will find where we belong. Martha and Arwen share a final glare. Arwen and Han turn first and disappear into the forest. Righteous slowly follows, still watching the mob. Once he is sure they won't follow, he turns and disappears. Silas clenches his jaw as his chest heaves. Across the field, Manon's grave rests still. In the background, the mob retreats back toward the village. Red Dream Sequence Montage. In the red abyss, the silhouette of Arwen kneels behind a stoic, motionless Han. She wraps her arms around him. Arwen's voice echoes through the red abyss, softly humming her soothing nighttime song once more. Righteous steps up to Han and gently removes his hood. Righteous then tenderly runs a talon down the profiled silhouette of Han's face. Your curse is mine. Arwen and Righteous stand together with Han between them. It's a silhouetted, dark family portrait smoldering in red. Exterior forest, night. The blue forest flickers with fireflies. Arwen leans against a tree. Righteous speaks closely to her. Would you still love me if I scarred you? Arwen feels the scar on her chest. I do. Would you still love me if I made you bleed? Yes, though my heart would break within me. Righteous turns away. Arwen lays a hand on his face and turns him back to her. She looks deeply into his icy eyes. Righteous, you are strong, and you are grown. Your cursed will is still your own. Righteous stares back. Yes, you need not fear. Arwen takes Righteous's hand and rests it on her pregnant stomach. Interior Arwen's cottage, night. Moonlight through the shutters casts over Conrad's face. With his eye patch removed, he stares into the POV vision of his scarred beast eye. Conrad POV through the eye of the beast. Arwen gazes up at Righteous lovingly. Seeing through Righteous's POV, it is as if she is looking at Conrad. Conrad fantasy montage. Conrad envisions Arwen again by the bright billowing window. This time, he is with her. The sheer curtains bluster in the wind, engulfing the two of them close together. Arwen rests her head on Conrad's chest, and their fingers intertwine. Back to scene in Arwen's cottage. Conrad holds two of the tied cloth dolls, himself and Arwen. A drop of blood falls on the Arwen doll. Glistening trails of tears run down Conrad's face. From his scarred beast eye, it is a tear of blood. A sudden knocking sound, like a heavy thud, from upstairs in the hayloft above. Conrad turns abruptly, startled. Hayloft. Conrad reaches the top of the ladder. At the far end of the loft, the closed window rattles, being pummeled by wind from outside. Conrad approaches the window as the mystic whispers fade in, emanating from behind the closed window. He arrives. Conrad thrusts open the window and all at once is hit by a gust of powerful wind as the whispers crescendo. An unseen brightness from outside the window lights up Conrad's stunned face. He gasps to black. Exterior forest, day. Martha picks berries and drops them into a small basket. Her arm bears a bite mark scar. A rustling sound catches her attention and she turns. Down the trail, all by itself, sits Arwen's notoriously large basket. A light fog passes. Martha blinks. She looks around, seeing no one. Unable to curb her curiosity, Martha approaches the basket. She arrives to find the contents of the basket are covered. Timidly, Martha reaches for the cloth and rips it away to reveal the contents. She snarls. Oh. The basket is full of neatly picked and preserved mushrooms, presumably of a very poisonous breed. End. This has been Mother of the Beast by Micah Atkinson.